to introduce Scott Farr, who has a very long 40-year career in solar energy. Scott's currently the director of the George Washington University Solar Institute and serves as the energy director for the Environment and Energy Study Institute there. He is also president of the Stella Group, which is a strategic policy and clean technology optimization firm facilitating clean distributed energy utilization. In addition to all of that, for 15 years, Scott simultaneously ran 2 DC-based trade associations as executive director of both the Solar Energy Industries Association and the National Bioenergy Industries Association. We are so pleased to have him here today to speak about financing for renewables and energy efficiency. Thank you, Scott.
I wear 2 hats. One, obviously, I teach 3 interdisciplinary courses on sustainable energy at the George Washington University, including the first course in the country on renewable energy and critical infrastructure. Next slide, please. I don't have control of my slides, so there we go. My company is not tied to any technology firm at all. I am brought in as an owner's rep business all over the world. I have projects on every continent, and I blend technologies. I help them decide which technologies. I write the specs. I help them select the vendors. In many cases, I help them blend financing, and I help make sure it goes in correctly. And you can see the whole list of technologies I'm involved with, everything. In addition, and that's all high-value energy efficiency, all the types of energy storage, and every kind of on-site renewable energy technology. I have 2 zero-energy buildings in Arlington, Virginia. One is a 2-story office building with R50 insulation, very insulated windows, photovoltaic roofing shingles, small wind turbine, hydrogen fuel cell, and a web-enabled battery bank. My home, also off the grid, has solar water heating, a direct exchange geothermal heat pump, and then a huge multi-panel photovoltaic system tied to a large battery bank. And so both buildings operate independently. I do tours here every week, except for the last few weeks, of course. And if we ever get through this, if you're ever in the Washington, D.C., Arlington, Virginia area, I'm happy to give you a tour free of charge. Next slide, please. So what I'm trying to do with this is look at some of the energy resources policies, the trends, to give you just sort of a context of where we're going. Obviously, this is about financing. I picked a couple of case studies and some resource for information. This is a huge topic. And so I have my email contact on the covering pages of this presentation. Feel free to email me. I can give you tons of studies or answer any questions. Next, please. So that was put together by DLR, which is actually the analytical group for Germany's NASA. And I just always like to put this in context, aside from being a very pretty slide, is we have a huge amount of renewable resources available to us every day. And you can see, 2,800 times, from the sun more energy than we use, 200 times more wind, 20 times more biodegradable biomass, 5 times more geothermal heat from the inside of the earth, wave and tidal energy 2 times, and hydropower 1 time. Obviously, it's not cost effective to access all of this all the time, but it is absolutely cost effective to access some of them almost everywhere. And that's what I do. Next slide, please. So I just want to this is actually a Eagle View picture. It's a company that does satellite overviews of your roofs. So the 2 middle buildings, you see the one sort of towards the back there, and you can see that's my office building with the solar panels. It's very hard to see the wind turbine, but it is on the left corner going up a pole. And of course, the battery bank's on the inside. my home, where you see a giant SpongeBob for the holidays, has all different solar panels because as I was doing all of this, I was running the solar trade group and wanted to show the different technology. In the center of the roof, there's a horizontal panel, and that is the solar water heating system. And that meets 100% of my water heating load. And then again, the solar and battery banks on both buildings, and of course the back building with wind too, meet the load for each building. I, again, use R38 insulation in the forward building, R50 in the back. The higher the R value, the more insulating. I have double pane argon-filled windows with low-E coatings. In my home, I have thermal barrier pane in the attic roof that reduces the heat gain during the summer. My attic is 15 degrees cooler than anybody's attic. And of course, both buildings, LED lights and Energy Star Plus appliances. So when I moved in my house, which was a one-story bungalow at the time, it used 5.4 kilowatts. And so obviously I put on the second story and all the stuff we just talked about. And it maximally uses now 3.2 kilowatts. So I doubled the space and I cut my energy use by a third. And if you took any of my classes, you would always see it's always less expensive to save energy than generate it from any source, whether it's traditional or the newer renewable stuff. And by doing that, it gives you many more options to significantly reduce energy on or around the building. Next, please. So policies matter. This is a chart of states that allow net metering, either mandate it in dark or have some rules in light or sort of ignore it in pure white. But the point is, net metering means that if you produce more electricity than you need in your building at the particular time, you get credited for that electricity. And that's actually very, very important because that creates a certain approach to compensation. Now, it's becoming less important because as batteries come down in costs, and they've come down 61% in the last 5 years, and they're coming down another 21% in the next 3, if your utility doesn't allow you, your state doesn't allow you to net meter, or some states put on these standby charges to claim that somehow they have to provide backup power, then in many cases you could say, well, I'm just not going to do any of that. I'm going to do what this presenter, Scott Sklar, did, was to save every ounce of electricity because it's more value inside. Plus, if you have a net metered system, that means when the grid goes down, you go down, whereas if you have a battery system, you don't. So again, net metering is good for solar in particular, small wind in many cases, and that's generally where it's used. Next slide. So these are the states that have clean energy standards or renewable energy standards. Some are and they all have different definitions of what's clean and what's renewable. Many of them include energy efficiency. Many of them include renewables. But the whole point here is that these are mandates either done by the state regulatory commissions or the states to have of new electricity that must be brought on. So at any rate, these are the states where it really matters. And obviously those that have the higher rates like Hawaii 100% and California coming in and a lot of the New England states and New York, you're going to see there's a huge incentive because the state and the utilities try to make it worthwhile because they have to meet certain mandates. And that there is a way either through RECs or SRECs, renewable energy credits, or solar renewable energy credits, or clean energy credits, or energy efficiency credits, so that the end user gets incentivized, gets money, basically, to have that resource. Next, please. So benchmarking laws, and this comes out of the Energy Star program, so I put this in here, but basically It's to take a look at both voluntary and mandated laws at the local level to drive clean energy. So if you're a business or you're servicing businesses, you want to know net metering laws, you want to know the portfolio standard requirements, and you want to know these local benchmarking approaches. Plus, certain cities now have stretch building code rules, meaning that if you're building something within the city limits in New York, Chicago's the lead, Washington, D.C., for example, you will go to the top of the list in your approval process if you're doing things to meet the benchmarking or stretch building code goals. And that's also a critical incentive. Next, please. So I put this in, it was in January 2020, and a couple of different sources for the data. But basically, they're expecting solar installation spike about 142 gigawatts this year. Now, I'm reading some data saying because of the virus thing, it's going down. It is, but in my area here in the Northern Virginia area, it's not going down at all. So it depends what people's situations are. I found during the last big economic meltdown, I thought my business would go to zero, actually, and it went up because corporations, commercial sector, said in times of uncertainty, you want to invest in things that are certain. And actually, energy efficiency and on-site renewables are about the most certain thing you can have because you know what it's going to cost. You know, there'll always be sun, wind, heat exchange with the earth, and of course, energy efficiency as well. So I do expect the market to expand, and of course, the utility scale projects are moving forward. I'm involved with a few, and so I'm thinking it's still going to be a good year, even with this horrible challenge we have. Next slide, please. So, you know, this is a Navigant study based on Lazard, which is probably one of the best economic firms around. And this, of course, is just looking at larger scale utility scale solar and offshore wind. I have to tell you, I've been involved in parts of teams with larger projects, both on the utility scale, the commercial industrial scale, and even the mixed-use building scale. And in all cases today, in 2020, we can definitely go below the more standard energy technologies. So, of course, it's not only the kind of technology, but how you finance it. And we're going to get to that issue in a moment. Next, please. So this is a Deloitte study a couple of years ago, accounting firm, and this just basically is reinforcing what you saw, but notice that this is looking at price and performance parity on and off grid, and large and small. So this is, I really want you to get a sense that this is not just giant utility scale systems. Next, please. And this is a article on how much the solar industry itself snagged in private finance dollars in 2019, $27.8 billion. I have to say, in all my projects, all over the world, whether it's energy efficiency, all the renewables, and energy storage, if it is a cost-effective installation, I have never had any problem getting financing for it. The money is out there, and I have to tell you, it's, you know, 10 years ago, you had to go very hard shopping. You really don't have to as much as you did in the past. Next, please. And I do want to say, since we're talking about the commercial sector, this is a August 2019 article from Deloitte regarding that 75% of the business in the U.S. have targets for renewable procurement. So that means the commercial sector, 2/3 of, 3/4 of them are saying, hey, we're going to bring in these technologies for our business. And this is a Forbes article on that. Next, please. So we have gone through a whole range of approaches for these technologies. And I do want to say, except for biomass, where you're using an actual fuel, solar, wind, geothermal, and the water technologies, and I'm going to include waste heat on this too, are essentially free, right? You do not, you're not being paid for it. Obviously, there are expenses to access it and to utilize it, but that's in the technology side. So you have a free fuel, but it's more capital intensive because you're not paying for fuel along the way, you're doing your whole investment. So we need to amortize it across the life of the system. And I want to remind you, in our society, how we handled that. Before World War II, most people did not own their homes. And the loans you got were for 7 years. Well, I couldn't buy a home if I had to pay it back in 7 years. So we began the secondary mortgage approach to actually amortize a large capital investment, a home, over a perceived life of the system, 20 to 25 years. And that's been the standard today. Well, to make it affordable. And really, that's what we're doing here on energy systems, is we are trying to amortize that capital cost so that the monthly cost is below what you would pay for a fuel-oriented technology powered by diesel fuel for diesel generators, of course, natural gas, and our electric grid. So everything I'm here is to really talk to you about what are the tools to do it. And I'm sort of highlighting 6 kinds of approaches here that are commonly used. The first 3 the most used, and the next 3 are evolving. So the first one is power purchase agreements. And I have slides on this, so we're going to get into detail. But just to remind you, this is a tactic in which the utility, the commercial entity, the industrial entity, the institution like a hospital, or for that matter, a house of worship or a religious school, signs a contract for the electricity, or in some cases, the thermal heat from a system. And again, they do it for a number of years, and they don't have to put money down, which is great. And the monthly cost of the power is, you're paying what it produced, but the rate is less than what you're paying from the utility company. So it's fundamentally cash positive. Leasing is another tactic to do the same thing. And you're not paying per kilowatt hour, you're paying a monthly fee, but it's comparable to what you would pay for a PPA. And some states do not allow power purchase agreements. And so in that case, because the regulatory commission or the legislation says you cannot buy power from anything that's not a utility, so a sanctioned utility. So then you usually use the leasing because you're not buying power here, you're just leasing the unit. It just happens to produce electricity. Shared savings is another tactic, and it's used very much by the U.S. federal government. In fact, it was started there. It's through energy performance contracts. And there, a company comes in and does exactly what the other 2 do, but it's mostly used for energy efficiency, solar water heating, in some cases photovoltaics and waste heat. And here again, the company puts up the money, you're signing a monthly fee for that, and the savings you get is much higher than what you pay your monthly fee for. And that's a good way to renovate a building. A lot of universities use that as well. And then we're going to talk about local governments, and there's Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy, CPACE. We have that here in Arlington County, Virginia, as an example. The MUSH markets these are the municipal, universities, schools, and hospital markets. They are a nonprofit, not exactly commercial, but very important nonprofit players. And then in this administration, we have created these opportunity zones where these are more financially distressed areas of the country to attract capital, and I'll cover that slightly. Next slide, please. So this is a chart looking at power purchase agreements from Bloomberg New Energy Finance as a tool. And just as I told you, the customer signs a long-term contract for electricity or heat, and the seller borrows money, and they install the project, and you get paid for output. The nice part about that is if the output, you don't get output for some reason, the system doesn't work, you don't have to pay. You know, it's just like utility. You only pay what you get, and what you get is less than your electric bill. This is the preferred approach globally now. It started here in the United States and goes up in gigawatts. So the whole point here is that we have a proven tactic. It's used commonly now, and I can't tell you, I can't even count on my heads or fingers how many commercial and industrial projects have been done this way, because, again, the owner does not put money down. They get a proposal. And in all these proposals, it looks at your electric bill and says what you're paying. In the commercial sector, remember, you have different electric subrates. They are expressed as demand charges, meaning if you use you go over using a certain amount of electricity, your electric rate goes up. So using energy efficiency and renewables to get you to stay at the lowest rate is very good. In certain states, you have peak and seasonal power rates, or time of day rates, where it's air conditioning time in the summer, and electric power costs more because the utility is bringing up more small and old generators. They're wheeling power in from other states, and they pass that on to you. And then in some of the partially or totally deregulated states, we have spot or ratchet rates during the summer, or in some cases the winter, where the rates go up astronomically 4 or 5 times for a certain period of time during the day. And it's, of course, applied at that time for the entire month, even if you only use it once. And the point there is I'm really brought in to zero out those higher electric rates. So I look at that bill, I look at how we deal with those higher rates, first through energy efficiency again, because it's always less expensive, and then what other sources of energy. Solar obviously is a lot more common, but I've done several with wind, and of course some with heating and cooling loads with geothermal and waste heat. So there are many different options at our fingertips, and power purchase agreements are the standard one. Most of the major solar companies now use them, whether it's for home, commercial, industrial, or even utility. And it's just a very common approach, and they have a lot of common apps to express it so it's understandable to the consumer. Next slide, please. So I also want to talk a little about community solar, and one, because this particular one also serves the church. So this is a 2.3 megawatt array that's on 13 acres. And community solar is usually used by local communities that want clean energy, but for a lot of different reasons, putting it on their buildings is not easy. Maybe you have a lot of rentals. Obviously, you can't put solar on somebody else's building. Maybe you have a lot of old buildings, and putting solar on an old roof doesn't make sense. You want to do it with a new roof. Maybe it's a low-income community. You have a lot of rentals and a lot of roofs. Maybe it's quasi-urban. You have bigger buildings on the south side blocking your access to sunlight, or for that matter, mountains. And so we have a lot of communities now working on community solar. There are companies that specialize in this. And basically how they do it is almost like a power purchase agreement in a way, is that they go in, find a piece of land. In many cases, it's sort of donated by the county, or in many cases house of worship or a university, sometimes a closed manufacturing plant or other industrial plant. And so you get land either for free or close to free, and it's near a feeder line that you can upload the electricity to. And so that's half the battle. And the other battle, of course, is you need to have subscribers. And just like a power purchase agreement, you get subscribers. And you usually look for anchor subscribers. So in this case, they had a local church. They had some of the local businesses be sort of the anchor subscribers. And then you have 373 households. And basically, you sign a contract for that power. And again, these people are not putting any money down for the solar. They're buying it just like a tiny little utility company to have access to green electrons. So that's another way to do it. And in this case, it benefited a local church. So I highlighted that. Next, please. Leasing. So in this case, the system is leased for 5 to 10 years. And then the owner has the opportunity to buy it for its residual value. In many cases, that's a few $100s to a few dollars, depending on how big the system is. This is an article that just showed that 28 funds over $3.1 billion to do solar leases. It's a very common approach. The investors in the leasing company, of course, owns your system. By the way, Tesla, the solar company, and the Powerwall, the battery company, lease their equipment. They own it. And so it's their investors that actually get the tax credit, not the building owner. And so because they own the system. And then the entity that is using the battery bank and the solar system just pays a monthly cost. And again, it's usually less than what you pay for utilities, because why would you do it otherwise? Next, please. Shared savings. This are called Energy Service Performance Contracts, ESPC. And so here, where the seller installs energy efficiency or renewable energy at their cost, charges the customer about for half of the energy savings. So let's just, I'm going to throw out some numbers here. So let's say you're spending $2,000 a month. The system, the service company will say, we're going to cut your rates in half to $1,000 a month, but you're not going to actually get a 50% savings. You're only going to get 25% savings, because you're going to then give the other 25% to us. And we're going to use that, obviously, to buy the equipment, finance it, and get a profit from that. So it's a way the installer and the user share the savings. And the good news with this, again, is they do not have to put any money up front, and their bill goes down, assuredly. And it's used for LED lighting and solar day lighting. It's used for very efficient heating, ventilation, and cooling systems, including geothermal, including solar-driven air conditioning, solar space heating, or radiant heating. So it's a very common approach, and now actually it's being used in some cases to integrate photovoltaics into that. Next, please. Commercial property assessed clean energy, so CPACE, is being used by more and more counties and cities around the country. It's a way to allow the owner to basically offset in the short term their property taxes. And then, so this applies more to the commercial rather than the house of worship. We don't pay taxes. And this lending does not go against your credit. This is county sanctioned or local government sanctioned, city sanctioned. And so you get the financing, the cost of your energy savings is more than what you're paying a month for the financing. And then when your building is sold, you will pay the differential in your taxes. So your property taxes don't go up. You don't get any lien against your buildings, and you can go on as usual, essentially like it never happened, but your energy costs are lower. And then when you ever sell your business, the building ever sells, then the county recoups what it did not get in property taxes. It's a wonderful way, and it's really good for small businesses in particular that don't have a lot of income or are new and don't have a long credit history to necessarily work out a lease or a power purchase agreement. So we're beginning to see it. It's still a very young approach, but it's very, very promising. And I'm going to stick my neck out and say I think maybe about 15% of local governments are doing some kind of PACE program. And I'm venturing to say that it will be over 50% in the next 5 years. So it is a tactic that's really growing. Next, please. So this is sort of how it works. I'm trying to find an understandable chart. It's driven by a local government, and they usually hire an administrator, a private company. Sometimes they have some people in the government itself, but usually not. The investors provide the capital and works with a local contractor, and the installation goes to the local building owner. And again, the tax assessment basically is reduced to make up for what you will be paying for a year for this new energy installation. So you are held harmless. You're not paying for it really. But when you sell your building, that gets deducted from your tax. What you foregoed or forewent, I guess is the right word, for your tax payments. Next, please. So states need to pass enabling legislation, and then a county or municipality has the CPACE program. PACE administrator manages the project. A contractor or an energy service company installs the equipment, and so private investors, bondholders, or government provide capital. So, and of course, you have to, and then the PACE assessment is either paid like a loan or, again, reduced and paid as part of your property tax, your reduced property tax. Next, please. PACE securitization starting in 2016, November, hit about $400 million. And by 4 years later, we're about $2 billion. So it's growing. Next, please. So two case studies, because that's the only time I have for this, and get questions. So this is a Unitarian Universal Congregation of Fairfax in Virginia, and they're using a CPACE program for this. And so it's an experiment, and so in this case, they're getting a securitization by the county so that they can put on a solar and advanced HVAC system. Next, please. MUSH markets. Again, municipalities, universities, schools, and hospitals. Now remember, a lot of churches have schools and hospitals or nursing homes, which are part of the MUSH market. And so there is a whole range of investors that have nonprofit instruments, including bonds or tax-exempt lease financing for these kind of projects. And again, they're financing the energy service companies, and in most cases, these are energy service performance contractors, which remember means the house of worship or the school or the hospital doesn't have to put any money up front to get this done. This is really focused on nonprofit entities. Mush market investments are actually very old. We've done them since World War II, and there are all sorts of boutique investment groups on these. I have participated in several projects with them. It's a little more complicated than the traditional private, PPA or leasing, but a lot of houses of worship and schools and hospitals tied to them are not very lucrative, don't have a lot of extra money to put into investment. So this is perfect for that kind of entity, and they really understand the nonprofit entity. The problem, frankly, with the house of worship, the religious school, and the religious hospitals or nursing homes is the traditional markets, you don't have the right to take the investment. If you fail on the loan, no one's going to, take over a church and sell it on the open market for private. It's just not happening. So the investors are layered by different securitizations to protect them from a default. Again, it hasn't happened that much, but it does. Of course, there's a little more risk. But at any rate, it still works. And energy efficiency, frankly, is a great, and some of the smaller solar projects, both water heating, space heating, and electricity, because energy is one of the highest costs of these kind of budgets. So if you're dramatically reducing them, let's say by 50 to 68%, which is what I normally do, that has immense capital fluidity for a nonprofit institution, even ones that are using small bits of energy. So it's something to think about. And again, there are boutique firms that specialize just in this. Next, please. So this is a school, and so this is put out that the kindergarten 12 sector spends $6 billion annually on energy bills, more than textbooks and computers combined. Reducing energy by 20% will result in cost savings of $3.3 billion in schools, colleges, and universities and religious schools. So there we go. So it makes a lot of sense. Energy is a big component. Next, please. Opportunity zones. Now, this came with the new tax law during this administration, and so basically they've designated opportunity zones. There are maps you can go on to look at that, and and then you can get reductions in capital gains tax and other kinds of investments so that investors feel incentivized to do it. I've done a few. I haven't done a lot of these, but again, in commercial areas, in sort of harder hit economic areas, and in nonprofits, opportunity zone investments make a lot of sense. I have an inkling, I wouldn't want to bet anything on it, but this next COVID-19 bill that's going to come out of Congress in a bipartisan format will probably have a little more incentives in this kind of program, because these are the areas that are hurt the most, and there's no reason why we can't attract capital as we have before in energy and water efficiency projects and some renewables. Next, please. And by the way, there are law firms that specialize in OZs, as we call them.
Sorry to interrupt, Scott. We do have another webinar poll that is now open for the attendees to answer, and we can give them maybe like 10 to 20 seconds to answer, and then I can share the results with everybody.
Okay, that's great.
The question is, for those who have installed / undertaken renewable energy and/or energy efficiency projects, how did you finance them? And feel free to select the ones that are applicable, and I'll close that poll. timer is down. There's about 15 seconds, and then the poll will close. But it looks like most attendees have responded self-financed, and then the next most popular option is lease. So I'll go ahead with that. Now you should be able to see the polling results in your WebEx panel. I'll go ahead and advance the slide for you.
So here's a energy infrastructure upgrades for a house of worship, and they wanted to obviously get solar photovoltaics. They needed some new tied to that, some structural work, and they also want to retire mortgage debt. So they used the PACE program, a PACE-secured power purchase agreement for $3 billion for a 300-kilowatt system, and that also allows them to replace the roof because, frankly, again, you cannot put a solar system on an old roof. It doesn't make sense. They did a lot of energy efficiency, smart thermostats, LED lighting, low-flow water fixtures, and HVAC upgrades. So their energy bill would be significant. And again, by doing all of this, next slide, please, they, their monthly costs were actually astounding. So they had over a 20-year period, well, they're not done yet, but they will achieve $3 million in utility savings and $600,000 O&M. And so about just nearly $5 million. And so their PPA payments are going to average around $500,000 a year, and so that's really it. It's a great net benefit. They didn't have to put any money out front, and they had lower energy bills, and of course they had a improved building as well. Next, please. So this is a nonprofit community church in North Carolina, and this was interesting because this was a test case. They signed a power purchase agreement before it was law, and you wanted to use it as a way to change the law. And the utility said the utility Duke Energy said that prior rulings correctly upheld the concept that any group selling power to somebody else is a public utility. And so they basically, instead of ripping this off the church, the state changed the law. Virginia did that too. A university, Washington Lee University, signed a power purchase agreement and got it installed on their university, which was not allowed, actually. And then the utility went to the Utility Commission to penalize them and force them to take it off or break the contract, and the legislature basically, the state legislature approved that schools and universities could only have power purchase agreements. That has been subsequently changed to most everybody. But so in this case, the religious and educational institutions are driving changes in law to save money and, of course, for public good. Next, please. So this is actually a sample I got out of the Energy Star program here at EPA, and so this is Quick Trip, part of the National Association of Convenience Stores, and basically they did a whole bunch of energy efficient investments in 800 franchises, and they did a study, and basically, it makes money. I mean, so that's really it. So they had energy savings using energy management system to automate lighting, heating and cooling, refrigeration, exhaust fans, and efficiency of its lighting and refrigeration. And next slide, please. Oh, I want to talk about batteries. So I don't know about you, but I live in 10 minutes from downtown DC. I have a lot of tree canopy, and the grid goes down 4 or 5 times a year because some tree knocks out a power line. I've done a peer-reviewed study of squirrels on how often squirrels knock down power lines. So we have outages. We have transformers that blow. We have more intense weather patterns with rain and flooding and high winds. So a lot of reasons the grid goes out. And so batteries are coming in because if you can install them, they work actually much better. And I hope I'm not going to get shot by the traditional generator size of the industry. But the fact is that because they have no moving parts. So battery banks in many cases are used just to charge up with the electric grid, and they can provide a few hours, not necessarily the whole building, though you can do it. Now this is one from Johnson Controls, provided by Con Ed Solutions around the country. And so this is a large battery bank. It looks like a closet. What's nice about these batteries, they can be pulled out by the handle and replaced, so you don't need an electrician to change out batteries for any reason. Totally web-enabled. And of course, what's nice is if you want to tie that independently to a solar system or a wind system or a waste heat to electric system in the commercial sector, these can be charged independently from the grid. And therefore, when the grid's down, you still have the battery bank that's feeding either tied directly to a sub-circuit breaker panel for your critical functions, or if you have a big enough space and it can match the load, you can do the entire building if you want. I generally stress critical function loads. Next slide, please. I've got to move this along so we can get questions. This is Tesla's Powerwall product, and 7 kilowatt hours, it's leased. Actually, Tesla broke the mold because people didn't want to buy jumbles of batteries that were assembled in their basement. And Tesla really brought in, I think, the first standardized modular battery bank with a service contract. And because you leased it, it meant that at end of life, the homeowner didn't have to worry about it. They take it back. It's their equipment. So you don't have to worry about disposing of batteries. They have had wonderful performance, as have most of the commercial battery banks. Next, please. Oh, and by the way, there are about 11 companies that have battery banks now. There's LG, South Korea, Sonnen from Germany. I mean, just a whole range of great companies with great standardized battery systems with great software. And they're just wonderful. So here are some resources that I felt would be good talking about solar and energy efficiency. Interfaith Power and Light is one of the leading entities that have focused on this. Energy Sage, Solar for Churches, Collective Sun for nonprofits, Considering Solar Power, Brotherhood Mutual, and Presbyterian Mission for Agency for Solar and Solar Churches. I hope that sort of gives you some texture of what's out there. I could have done 15 slides just recommending different entities. There's some wonderful, inventive, very professional approaches to do this. And next slide, please. Here is the Energy Star and Department of Energy and PACE side of it. So you get a little bit of the government places that you might want to look at for workbooks. Hope you utilize. Next, please. And here's my contact information. Personal email is best for this, but so if you have a question, I prefer an email rather than a call. Happy to get you the information. And just to remind you, good planets are hard to find. I'm an amateur astronomer. I look out there. I don't see any planets with